Welcome to the Startempire Wire Founders Podcast, where we make entrepreneurial founders a top priority. Each episode features risk takers, business builders, community shapers, institutional and government supporters in our local startup ecosystem. Tune in weekly to hear all about what's happening with the movers and the shakers of Southern California's Inland Empire and beyond. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Founders Podcast. I am here with Jennifer Hiramoto. She works for the City of Ontario, and she's going to give us an introduction about who she is, what she does, and all of that jazz.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So where should I start? How long do I have? 30 minutes for my life story?
You got it.
Just kidding. So I'm Jennifer Hiramoto, Economic Development Director for the City of Ontario. I've been here for about a year and a half, and I've been working in government for about 10 years. But prior to that, I had a first career. I'm a former newspaper reporter. I grew up in the Bay Area, grew up in Fremont, had a love for newspapers even at a young age, and went to San Jose State, worked for the Spartan Daily up there. But it was really when I got a job at a small newspaper called the Los Gatos Weekly Times up in the Bay Area. And I was reporting on town government. And it was really during that experience that I kind of got to witness what I think is like the live theater of City Hall and local government. And I remember there was one meeting in particular where they were talking, it was a finance meeting, they were talking about budget. And again, I'm just a reporter taking notes on this, right, getting ready for my story. But the town manager at the time and the city attorney, they were so concerned that they had a new revenue stream coming in, but they couldn't count on it. And so they didn't want to spend all that money. Do you know who's in Los Gatos? And this was like 2006, so it was brand new.
No, I'm not sure.
Any guesses? It was Netflix. So Netflix's headquarters was Los Gatos.
Wow.
And it's kind of funny, right? Fast forward to today, I'm sure the city of Los Gatos is doing just fine with their revenue stream. But it was kind of that little simple story that was enough to make me think, local government's kind of interesting.
Yes.
So from there, I moved down, got a job at the San Gabriel Valley Tribune, where again, I reported on cities. And it was, once again, it was just covering planning commission meetings, just local government 101, it felt like. And I loved it. I thought it was, unlike reporting, I kind of hit a point where I realized, with being a newspaper reporter, you kind of identify a problem and you write about it. Yes. But then you kind of leave it up to the universe to figure out where to go from there. Mm-hmm. But the joy, I think, in local government is you have the ability to identify a problem, come up with a solution, implement it, and then see your progress. And that's what I love about my job. And that's kind of where I am today.
Well, I think we appreciate you joining us, first off. So you've told us a little bit about how you came into, working in government. How did you come into your current position with the City of Ontario?
So I still live in actually the Pasadena area. Ontario has always been a very attractive city. And I think part of it is when you look at what the assets are here between the airport, the convention center, the arena, you have a growing city, you have area to still develop. It's in a perfect location. All of these things for someone like me who is really passionate just about progress, right? And trying to make a difference within the community. It seemed on paper that Ontario was like the perfect guy, so to speak. And so there was an opportunity that popped up in Ontario. I've worked now for a few cities. I was in the city of Glendale. Glendale's a little bit more built out than Ontario, a little bit more of kind of, that urban density. And again, for someone like me within the economic development division, Ontario, it really offered it all. It had resources, it had assets, it has a very strong organizational culture. And it's a fun place to work. So
Very
this
cool.
opportunity, it popped up, I applied, and it's been a very fast year and a half.
Wow. So only a year and a half in the city of Ontario, and you've enjoyed your tenure there, I believe,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what, yeah, in your tenure here, I know you're learning about what's going on in your region, about what the government is doing for startups. What type of initiatives does the city of Ontario have for startups and for the business culture in Ontario?
Sure. So I can't answer this question and really talk about this in detail without reflecting on some of the work that I did while in the city of Glendale. I worked there between 2015 to about 2020. And a lot of our effort was actually focused on fostering an ecosystem for technology and innovation, and really focused on startups and building up that startup community. So we started everything from a Glendale Tech Week to doing meetups. We got a grant to host, to do 2 separate accelerators. And as well as anybody, part of that work in building up that ecosystem is making relationships, knocking on doors,
Yes.
for anybody and everyone that's a part of that ecosystem, right? From schools to startups to venture capitalists and everything in between. So that was like fresh in the brain when I came over to the city of Ontario. And I was really excited out the gate to see that Ontario does have an accelerator and incubator program that the city itself sponsors, fourth sector. And there's a city-owned property. Fourth sector has been, under Kevin Meredith, has programmed that space. The unfortunate thing for fourth sector is with COVID, their timing could not have been worse, right? And I think while they have done a lot in programming and doing kind of virtual and digital programming, there's still something with that personal connection that that face-to-face is really like the best way to do it. So the city has had this resource, and Kevin's work has been really focused, I think, on the logistics industry as well. Yes. So the city does have that, and I think during my time here, it has been, once again, right, just trying to knock on doors and figure out what resources do we have here, and do we even have a startup community, and what do they need?
That's a good question.
And that takes time, right? So we did host, the city did create our own meetup. It was called the Idea Exchange, really focused on innovation, design, entrepreneurship, and adaptability. So we've hosted those at fourth sector. Meanwhile, we have other resources like AMPAC that are not city sponsored, but a tremendous resource. You've worked with AMPAC, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Brian was on 2 interviews back, and they're doing some pretty cool stuff.
Yes, and the enthusiasm from AMPAC is unmatched, and it's been fascinating to see the work that they do, and they've been just really just like, they're working very hard at what they do, and I think we'll see some quick wins from them as well, just because they moved into a new space and they've been really phenomenal.
Right.
So you have some of these resources that are city sponsored. You have others that just kind of happen by their, like, in their own right, which is great, and they don't need any city sponsorship. You have other traditional resources like the Small Business Development Center. And then, of course, the relationships with schools and the universities are critically important.
Okay. So I'm a fan of, there's a book by Brad Feld that's called Startup Communities. And one of the things he mentioned in the book is that, there are 2 groups of people, the leaders and the feeders. So one of the things that he mentioned was that the leaders are the entrepreneurs. Are there many entrepreneurs stepping up in the city of Ontario to take a lead outside of like what AMPAC is doing and help lead the entrepreneur ecosystem?
So it's still a difficult question for me to answer, because my hunch is that the answer is yes. but it's very possible and highly likely that they are successful without city involvement, right? And that in its own right is a success, because I'm a student of that book as well, and I think governments can play at times a helpful role. At times they don't do anything, right? They're just like, they want to be there, they want to be invited to the party, but they don't bring any value. Right. So I understand that. I think from the city's position, if there's ways in which the city can add value, right? Whether that's grant funding, access, right? Perhaps it's introductions, maybe it's the political capital, access to RFPs. I mean, there can be some legitimate steps that the city can take to help bolster entrepreneurs and the startup community. I am still unsure whether the city has fully flexed its capacity in that regard. And I think that there's still a lot more potential there. And to that, I would say, to any entrepreneur or startup within the Ontario or beyond community, to call the Economic Development Department, because we want to have those conversations. We want to be helpful and a resource, but we also need to do it in a way that is actually helpful, if that makes sense.
Are you guys doing anything in a way to attract those people in and say, hey, let's do an event for entrepreneurs in the region or in our city, to kind of get a mixing or something like that. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. And it's
come to City Hall, get free drinks or something like that,
So that was, we have a meetup that we've started with that, the idea exchange. We kind of put that on pause as we are working on doing an accelerator RFP right now to try to find someone who can assist with that programming. Again, we're in a really fun position here at the City of Ontario and Economic Development in that we want to be helpful, but I'm not an entrepreneur. I can fake it, but I'm not an entrepreneur. So I think when it comes down to it, if there are experts out there who they speak this language, right? They talk the talk, they walk the walk. If we can engage them and help us be more deliberate in the resources we offer and how we connect with that community, I think that there's a way to do that. To do that effectively. Now I'm coming again fresh out of Glendale, where I was part of the group that started Glendale Tech Week. We did this for 5 years. It was time consuming, it was rewarding, it was worth it. But to get up to that point, part of it is, I think, a fundamental question of, does the community want this?
That's a good question as
well.
Right?
Is the community out there? Do they need this? Where do they go for their resources? What would be helpful to them? So I think the balance that we always have at the city is, these are taxpayer dollars at the end of the day. What is the ROI, right? Is there a high return on investment if we start throwing these large scale events? And if there's another way to be more effective, then we're open. We want to have these conversations and we want to figure out what to do. So
I like that you mentioned that there needs to be a need. And from my experience, I've only seen good momentum when you've got a core group of people who are interested. You don't need a lot. You can have 5 to 7 core group of people in your city who are entrepreneurs who, in partnership with you, could bring together some type of event like this. I'm very convinced that a rising tide lifts all boats. So if Ontario succeeds, then the cities in this region, the surrounding areas, are going to succeed as well. That leads into my next question. The Inland Empire startup ecosystem industry is tremendously fragmented. A few top-tier hubs, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego, are well covered by media, events, and data platforms. Finding reliable information relevant to startups or the tech industry in the Inland Empire is extremely difficult. As a result, startups can't scale fast enough. Investors are having a hard time finding the right deals, and corporates can't find the right companies to partner with for their innovation activities. Startempire Wire, the leading Inland Empire startup publication, is providing the Inland Empire startup ecosystem with the most accurate, engaging business and financial data, events, and news. Our reach of entrepreneurs, C-level executives, angels, VC investors, startup employees, key management at innovative corporates, and big tech is the solution for your B2B or B2C needs. As we build out our platform, we're looking for partners. This is your opportunity to get in on the ground level. If you're looking to align yourself with the local and growing startup and tech ecosystem of the Inland Empire, we have created the platform to get your name noticed and the opportunity for you to grow the recognition of your brand. Contact us today for availability and pricing options. We look forward to our partnership with you. How are you, through economic development department, working with others in the Inland Empire region to foster like this startup ecosystem?
So I think this is just a lot of it is just like it's like old school relationship building, right? Like it kind of reminds me a lot of what I used to do when I was a reporter, where you would do an interview, and then you would, at the end of it, I would always ask, is there someone else I should talk to, right? And so it's very similar here, where there's a great organization called the Alliance for SoCal Innovation.
I just chatted with Billy Bryan.
Okay, yeah. So through the Alliance, we were able to get connected with some new friends. So City of Murrieta, they're a great example. They have a strong ecosystem that they're working on. So we talk to them and try to ask, just kind of share best practices. What are they doing? How are they working on their efforts? One of the things that we're doing is actually through our work with UCR right now, we commissioned a study on to better understand the economic impacts of distribution and logistics sector. Wow. And we're still receiving, they're still working on this data, but one of the bright spots in there is that it showed that Ontario, there's kind of two classifications, I guess, within the logistics sectors. And one is kind of like general logistics, and another is with these kind of, they're called, I guess, white collar logistics jobs, right? These are the consultants. These are kind of more on the administrative and management side. We have a higher propensity of those folks within Ontario compared to other regions. And to kind of long-windedly answer your question.
No, as much as you need to.
Okay.
As much as you need to.
I think part of it is like using that data then to figure out, okay, who are those folks in those quote white collar logistics jobs? What is it that they need? And how do we continue to support and grow future entrepreneurs or spinoffs from these companies? And I think what we're really looking at, I mean, these are like robotics, EV, right? Like those are areas in which it seems like there's going to be more and more startups, and we do see that. So what can we do to continue to, one, identify those folks, and two, foster their growth?
That's cool.
I don't have the answers yet, but I do know that like when we, through our connections, like at San Bernardino, at the county, they'll let us know, hey, there's this company that does this. You should talk to them. And so it's kind of like a ball of yarn, right? And we keep on pulling at it to see what else we find and what else then we can do to support that effort.
We do a lot of research here at Startempire Wire, so we may break some news before you even know it. So be sure you're subscribed to the email list. One of the things that came out a while back was that the Inland Empire region has a higher level of electric vehicles than any other region of California. So
wow.
Yeah. So like I have to go back and look at it, but we wrote an article about it, and there was a report that came out. So there's a lot going on in our region for electric vehicles. CARB just came to Riverside. The law that everything has to be electrified by 2035. Obviously, it's going to drive a lot of that. So people don't really have a choice but to sort of transition in that way. So it's going to bring a lot of business. I do believe there's one other startup in your region. I may be wrong, but I believe the name of the startup is, let me get it. Kidget. Keep It Green Tech.
Okay.
Paul Francis. So I think he's in Ontario. I could be wrong.
Yes, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, they create electric charging stations. So that's really interesting. So as far as, your plans within the next, I would say, let's just say the next year, what are you guys doing in the economic development department in Ontario to begin to foster the startup ecosystem? What is there anything like in the near future that you can say?
There's a couple of things, and then I think that there are items tangentially related to it. So one of the items is, I mentioned, we're going to release an RFP seeking an accelerator operator. This will likely, though, be more focused on programming as well, right? So understanding that those relationships with folks and just, offering kind of like serendipitous opportunities for people to meet one another, like that goes a long way. And I think coming out of COVID, people are hungry for this. Right. So we'll be releasing that accelerator operator RFP within the next couple of months. Okay. We do have some exciting updates as well, as far as new, like actual brick and mortar buildings that are coming in, and the city. One of the other things that economic development does is we do work on real estate transactions with the properties that are located within the city. Okay. And one of those recently has been a partnership with University of Laverne. So they will be building they already have a university or ULV College of Law building here in the city of Ontario. They'll soon be building a College of Health, and they will be adding this was sponsored by Randall Lewis. It'll be the Lewis Center for Social Impact, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation. And that will be located right here in Ontario. Very cool. In working with ULV and specifically the president, Devorah Lieberman, her vision for downtown Ontario is really to establish it as an innovation corridor. Wow. And we love that, right? Yeah. There's probably a lot that needs to happen between now and then, but I think just getting a physical location that has that type of reach would be, I think that would go a long way. So we're working with ULV on that. That'll occur within the next year. Then there's fun things, and I know that this is not necessarily appropriate to say, but when I look at the airport, at the Ontario airport, it's almost like a startup in its own right? After it was able to come into its own in 2015 and really build up its own momentum, there's still much growth there to occur. Yes. And as a result, we're starting even things like workforce development opportunities there. Nice. Between like Mount Sac, for example, they started hosting one of their classes there. So it does seem that just the airport's proximity can open up future opportunities in the startup arena. I don't know what that looks like, but it just seems kind of like a natural link that we'll continue to explore.
Yeah, and we're not talking only early stage startups. We talk about large company startups, entrepreneurship. There's actually 6 categories of startups, the way we've categorized them. So we've taken the broadest definition possible. Airport is perfect. And
one thing to mention too. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that we noticed that I learned when I was in Glendale is that Glendale startup scene, it was very heavy in like media and entertainment, in part because they had a couple of the they had Disney located, like the production studio in Disney.
Yes.
And there was many times that we would come into contact with folks that worked at these studios and in nearby communities as well. So they worked in these studios and then they had their own idea, right? And they kind of like had their own spin-off. And then as a result, they came up with their idea, right? And they started their own startup. And my thesis, though I have not tested it yet, but I'm sure that is still happening here in Ontario as well, right? It may be a different sector, but at the end of the day, we're problem solvers, right? As people, you're problem solvers. So if there's someone that is working, for example, at a QVC distribution facility, and they have they're doing this day in, day out, and they have a better idea of how to do something, then how do we make sure that those folks know, number one, there's resources here in the Inland Empire to help them take their idea from just idea to an actual product, right? But secondarily, if there are those folks out there, how do we tell their story? And that's where I think your work really comes in to play, is help us tell that story. In Ontario, that's you, right?
Me. Yeah, send them to me.
Well, you send it to us. I mean, we need some help. We have 10,000 businesses in the community. Ontario is huge. It's 50 square miles. It still takes a ton of time to drive from one section to another. We have 6 people on our team. We're hustling to try to make sure that we're equally representing everybody. But I think social media can be a great asset. If people come across cool businesses that we should be featuring, let us know, because we want to be able to highlight the talent that's here.
So I will gladly send you every founder interview I do, and we need to figure out a collaborative partnership, how we can work on that, because our goal at Startempire Wire is really to be the kind of a database of who's who in the Inland Empire, because we really don't know until we go and meet them. And that's one of the reasons I set up this podcast, because I really like to meet people. So outside of that, is there anything else you want to add on top of this? Something we didn't cover, something relevant to your work with economic development, that's beneficial to the overall startup ecosystem, large and small? Let us know.
Sure.
What's going on.
Well, I think, again, while this fostering a startup scene and a healthy ecosystem is very important to me, I have many passions. And actually one of them is on our downtown Ontario. So I mentioned to you that there's really 3 pillars of things that we do within economic development. And it's the first is business attraction, retention, and expansion. The second is we have a workforce development component. And then a third is on our real estate development. So on that third pillar, and they all intersect, but within downtown Ontario, this has been an area that if you walk through it, you'll look at it and you'll think, that's really pretty. Why doesn't the city do more, right? I like the median, it's historic, it seems walkable, but what else is there to do? And the city has really been very proactive in the past few years in controlling its own destiny. And I think that's what it comes down to, where you've had many longtime property owners who either maybe can't afford to keep those buildings up to the par that kind of the newer generations expect. And so the city has taken an active role in connecting with developers or even purchasing the property itself. So we have many exciting things on the horizon for downtown Ontario. And I think to bring it full circle back to the startup community, having amenities, right? Like places where you can walk, places where you can drink or grab a beer or a glass of wine, places where you can see music, places where you can live in an urban environment and still feel safe. All of those are on the horizon for downtown Ontario. And it's part of the reason why I'm here, quite honestly, that I know that my work in Ontario today is going to result in a different Ontario tomorrow. And that downtown is going to be very cool and the gem of Southern California. I walk it every day. I'm committed to it. And so that's really one of my messages to folks too, is I don't know where else you can get this type of authentic, walkable downtown. And sure, you can get in 5 years from now, but you should get in right now because
get in early.
So that's like my message is downtown Ontario has a lot happening. And
yes,
you should check out some of the cool businesses that are there as well.
So you guys heard it here first on the Founders Podcast. Make sure you get into that downtown area early before all of the rent goes up because of all of the development that happens.
That's right. And hats off to the city council as well. They've already made some significant investments within downtown Ontario. They have, there's a town square. They do a summer concert series. They as in the City of Ontario. And then there's some really cool entrepreneurs that are popping up. There's a Mestiza Bakery and Cafe that has some wonderful coffee. I had way too much earlier this afternoon. I wanted to be ready for you today. But between Mestiza and you have Logan's Candies, that's like a mainstay in Ontario, and Gloria's. And so there's more and more businesses that are coming in, and we're super excited about that.
That's so cool. So Jennifer, I really appreciate you for coming on to the Founders Podcast. You are the first in the government, the feeder. You're the first feeder, leaders and feeders. You're the first government person on here. I really appreciate it. And is there anything else that you want to, outside of everything else we said, anything else that you want to add?
No, I guess I'll leave it with, I am extraordinarily bullish on Ontario, and I know I'm not the only one. We meet with developers, businesses, folks who visit our convention center, arena, hotels, airport, the folks that are redeveloping pretty much Southern Ontario. It's the fastest selling master plan community in California and number 5 in the US. So I think that there's so much potential here. And for those that are listening, if there's more effective ways that the city can be helping your startup or your business, call me. I mean, call the City of Ontario. We don't have all the answers by any means. We want to be effective and helpful. So that's really what we're all about here in Ontario.
You heard it here first on the Founders Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Jennifer for coming on today. And ladies and gentlemen, tune in for the next Founders Podcast that's coming up. Meet you there then. Peace.
Great. Thank you, Various.